I'm Amber Uper, and this video is an explanation about how I tie the rails together for my 7.5-inch garden railroad. I use it for hauling things. It's a minimal gauge. And I have a couple of other videos on my channel about that. But I had some questions about how I tie the rails together, and I use steel T-posts for rails. And I got a little section of that right here for you to look at. You can see why they call it a T-post, because it's got that shape. I suppose if you turn it over, then it looks like a T. But anyway, let me put the camera down here on the table, and then you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so here's an assortment of stuff. This is what I use to tie the rails together. Not sure if you can see the holes in that. Yeah, I guess you can see through them. And it's like this. So this is a piece of bent angle iron. It's not the same as the rolled angle iron, because as you can see, this edge, the outside corner, is rounded. It's not sharp like regular angle iron. I think I got a piece here, so I'm going to grab one of those and show you the difference. Okay, so here's a piece of, this is 1 inch by 1 inch hot rolled angle iron, and you can see, I hope you can see this in the video. There's a sharp edge here on the outside corner, and the problem with that is that outside edge makes it harder to fit the track joiner onto the rails. Now if you look at this, this has a rounded edge here, and you probably can't see that. There we go. It's got a rounded edge here where the track is, well, these are T-posts, where the T-posts are rolled. And so that's not a tight curve here, or tight corner here. So if you try to use this stuff into here like this, you run into problems with that edge here. So, oops. So that's not going to work very well. Whereas if you go to use this in here, it fits in much better. Of course, I got to go that way. So you end up with something like this. And what happens here is I tie two pieces of rail together like this. And this is, these are 6 inches long. I buy them in 36-inch lengths from the hardware store. These are 6 inches long. And I cut them with my Sawzall, so they're never quite exactly 6 inches, nor are they quite square on the cut, but they'll do. So I set up my drill press with the guide fence that comes with it to make holes in the same place. And I set it to drill the first hole 1 inch in from the edge. And then I drill them, all the ones that I've cut, I drill them all from one edge, 1 inch in. And I use a 7/32 drill bit for the holes. And then I reset that fence to drill the next holes 5 inches in from this same end. That way I get the 4-inch spacing between the holes, and it doesn't really matter if there's a little less than an inch or a little more than an inch here on this end, because the holes are 4 inches apart, and they start from one edge of the rail connector, sometimes called fish plates. Rail joiner, rail connector, fish plates, all the same. So, and then when I go to drill the rails, I've got this rail here. I've got these two things that I made. They were supposed to be more of these fish plates, rail connectors. What I did was I put one of these on the end, and you can see that. And I just screwed it on with a couple of number 10 screws. And then I drilled a hole 1 inch in from the end, just like I would normally do. And then I made this so that it's exactly 2 inches from that hole. So it's the center, more or less the center of it, but it's set up so that it's exactly from this edge to this edge is 2 inches. And then I always have the hole in the same place. So I use this one if I set it up like this, and I can drill from the outside, especially if I have the track already put together. I can drill from the outside of the rail, and that hole is going to be 2 inches in from the edge, and it's going to be centered where it needs to be centered for these pieces to fit. And of course, I have one for both sides of the rail because I was doing I was drilling rails when they were already put together at on the ties. So instead of taking them all off the ties, I just made 2 of these things, one for each side, as you can see. So you put that on there and you drill the hole, and then you always have your hole at the same place in this way, which is supposed to be 2 inches to the center of the hole from the edge here. And the holes, they're like I said, they're 7/32, and they're a little big for the number 10 screws that I use, but that gives them a little slop room to fit the rails together, and it also allows a little bit of expansion and contraction with the heat when the sun heats them up or when it's cold or whatever. So that way I always have them, you know, they won't push together too much. And if they spread a little bit apart when they shrink, when the rails shrink due to the cold, then there's still some slop room because of the oversized holes. So basically, that's how I do it. And then the other rail is just put in here to connect them together. And I have one on each side of the rail because that really stabilizes the joint here so that they line up, the 2 rails line up properly. And let's see, I think I have the other half of that piece that I cut off here, so I'm going to grab that. Okay, so this is the other half of that rail that I, this was a 5-foot fence post basically, and I cut it in half. And in a previous video I talked about how I grind the nubs off the bottoms of these, because normally there's these lumps that go all the way up the length of the T-post. And if you're using these for rails, you have 2 choices. You can either grind the nubs off where the ties are going to fit, or you can cut slots in the ties for the nubs to fit into. But if you're cutting slots in the ties, they have to be pretty close in order to get your 7.5 or 7.25 inch gauge, or whatever gauge you're going to make, to be properly gauged. It's easier for me to just cut the nubs off. You don't have to cut them all off, you just have to figure out what your tie spacing is going to be and cut the ones off where your ties are going to be. But this is part of a turnout that I'm making come spring. I got to wait till spring to make it. But this is the part that comes off the turnout for one route, and this is the leftover here for the that I cut this off of for the track. So this, I'll use part of this for the inside of the turnout, but that's a different story. Anyway, so I'll show you what we got here. We're going to put the rail together like this, and then you put one of these on this side and one just like it on the other side, and you have your holes drilled. You put your 2 screws through and put the nuts on it, and that holds the track in place. And when you have one of these on each, you know, just having one will work. That's what I did for a long time. But some of my track joints, because I was using T-posts from different batches and they're not all the same size, you kind of got to watch that when you're doing them. It's best to buy all your T-posts from the same place or whatever. I have some T-posts that are 30 years old that I'm using, and they're different from the new ones. This is a new one. So anyway, you do that, and that will hold it pretty decently. But if you're having problems with alignment like that, you know, just little bits of alignment where it's out, doesn't take much to get the wheel to the flange of the wheel to catch on a uneven or a unsquare, whatever you want to call it, track joint, and ride up over the rail and derail. So if you really want to be sure, you put one of these on each side, and then at least at the local hardware store that I get these from, there's two different thicknesses of this. And this is the heavier thickness here. There's a thinner one, and I was using the thick ones on the outside of the rail and the thin ones on the inside of the rail just to give me better alignment. And the thin ones are less likely to interfere with the flanges on the wheels. So that's why I decided to use the thin ones. But for my track joiners, for the screws, I use number 10 stainless steel. I think they're 10 by, what is it, 10 by 24? Because there's two. There's a coarse thread and a fine thread. 10 by 32, 10 by, I think it's 24. And I use the coarse thread because you don't need the fine threads. But anyway, I use them, and then I put a washer on I use stainless washers that are number 10 washers. I put one washer on the screw, and then I put it through the track joiner or fish plate. And then on the other side, when it goes through the other fish plate, then I put a washer on the outside of that, and then the nut. And I just use standard stainless steel nuts. I wouldn't mind using lock nuts, but they're a lot more expensive than regular nuts. And to me, it's just as easy to go around and check the nuts every once in a while. It's not like I have hundreds of feet of track. I probably have about 100 feet of track total on my railroad. So anyway, that's how I do my track joiners, sometimes known as fish plates. So there's my video. Thanks for watching.